Hey guys, it's Sadie. Welcome back to the Hear Me Out podcast. Today, I just want to do a quick episode, actually. Nothing too long, but I wanted to talk about an experience I had today, just kind of my thoughts on it real quick, kind of what I want to do moving forward, just kind of like what it prompted me to think about. And that is today I went to a coffee shop on campus that I don't normally go to. And with that, it was like staff, obviously, that I wasn't familiar with, no familiar faces, and it was like a pretty small corner in this building. And I was minding my own business, just trying to lock in a bit. And with that, I was wearing sound canceling headphones because I do get overstimulated really easily. And it was a pretty slow hour for business. So one of the baristas came around the counter as her friends had come in and sat down at a table, and she was conversing with her friends about books. And literally, why did that just come out of my mouth? If you don't know me, I am a really big reader, and specifically with fantasy series. And so they were talking about fantasy series, these three women, and it was just one of those things where no sound canceling headphones could just block out these words. Even through sound canceling headphones, I would hear Powerless and Red Queen, and my ears would just perk up, you know what I mean? And then one of the girls is like, oh, 2 days ago, I just got done reading Onyx Storm. And neither of her friends had read it, and you could just see how badly she wanted to talk about this book. And luckily for me, who also would love to talk about this book, I was right there and eavesdropping a little bit, because it's just one of those things, when you are so hyperfixated on one source of sound that's coming to you and it's something you're interested in, it's so hard to ignore. And in this case, I think it was harmless. Okay, so I take off my headphones naturally, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help but hearing that you just finished Onyx Storm. And her face lit up. Her eyes just got super big, and both of her friends had just kind of started laughing, knowing that she, I guess, was just going to spew about it. And so she was like, oh my gosh, yes, have you read it? And I was like, yes. And she was like, I just finished it 2 days ago, and I am a little confused of what was happening, but what are your thoughts on it? I love it, blah, blah, blah. And so we started talking for what ended up being, I don't know, maybe 35 minutes about books. It started with Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros, if you haven't heard of it. It's the third book in the Fourth Wing series. And so we started talking about that book. And then naturally, if you consider yourself a romantasy fan at all, you have read Sarah J. Maas. And so if you're unfamiliar with that author, she wrote A Court of Thorns and Roses, that series, as well as Throne of Glass and Crescent City. And so then naturally, the conversation just segues into talking about all 16 books in the SJM universe, and specifically Throne of Glass. We were talking about how we think about it so often, and how we both read it in high school, but it impacted us so deeply, and how we both think it's time for a reread this summer when we have time to binge read more. And so, like I said, we were talking for 35 minutes, and it was a slow time for business, so only 3, maybe 4 customers had come in during this time. So she would, granted, every once in a while take their order, but then she'd be behind the counter making their drinks and talking to me, and then she would come back over, and we were just giving our theories and our recurring thoughts and our favorite characters and blah, blah, blah. And I have to say, it was so refreshing, and the fact that this wasn't even the first time that this has happened in my life makes it that much better, because I love to just add another interaction of this kind to my memory, to my experiences. And I just think about how books have never failed to give me an opportunity to connect with people. And so I was thinking a lot about that, and I was also thinking about how much energy I just had leaving this conversation, and how this happens not a lot, but when I am so recharged by a stranger, I will concede that books tend to be the connecting factor, because if you overhear someone talking about it, or more times than not, you will see them physically reading a copy in public. So it's really easy to pick up on. And I mean, not always, like I'm not going to stop every person I see reading ACOTAR, for example. But I mean, if you even just want to do a comment in passing, then that just kind of gives a little bit of energy back to each person. You feel a little seen, and just kind of happenstance, stranger sort of comment, whatever. But yeah, I was just thinking about how I left that conversation. At one point I was like, okay, I'm so sorry, girl. Thank you so much for entertaining me. I do have to lock in now. And so then I went back to work a little bit, but she replied, yeah, no, like, thank you so much. This was great. I'm so glad I understand the book more, and I'm so glad to have like talked to you about this. Thank you. And that just recharged me. And so what I was saying earlier about what I want to do moving forward more is definitely to talk to strangers. There's always a time and place, and I'm not saying I want to become the person who every time they go out they seek to connect to someone, but because granted I am a pretty, I feel like, keep to myself person most of the time, at least when I'm just getting from point A to point B. Like, I will connect with people and be present when I am at said destination, but in transit I rarely am, I don't know, just smelling the roses and whatever. I'm notoriously a fast walker, and I wear my headphones a lot and am just kind of in my own world. And recently I've been trying not to be so much like that. And I do like my process and my music in the morning and such. But every once in a while, in the past few weeks, I will leave my headphones at home intentionally, or I'll just put them in my backpack if I need them for later. And I will look around, and I will be in tune to conversations I hear as I'm passing, and I will hear the birds chirp and all that stuff. So there's just so many stories you hear along the way, you know what I mean? And also, I consider myself an observant person, and yet I'm in my own world so much of the time, so then that just doesn't even make sense. I don't deserve that descriptor if I don't do this every once in a while, you know? And so I just get so much energy from other people, specifically when you aren't anticipating an interaction with someone and it just feels like truly happenstance, like maybe you were meant to be in the same place at the same time with this person. And more times than not, when I do kind of initiate conversations with people, or if I'm lucky enough to have someone kind and initiate it with me, you know what I mean, it just kind of restores your faith in humanity a little bit. You know, it's just nice to be reminded that it is a small world, and we all can kind of connect with people we might not have thought we would have connected with or had the opportunity to connect with over things that we might not have known or picked up on. You know, if you had those headphones on, or you didn't stop to talk to the person, and all of a sudden you got a conversation rolling or something like that. So I feel like just interacting with strangers more than I do now, again, not saying I'm trying to bother people and not have social cues, but if the opportunity presents itself and I hear someone talking about a really great book I read this year, you know what I mean, I'm going to chime in if they don't have someone to talk to about it. I don't know. But yeah, books definitely have never left me without like a talking point. And I also feel that a lot of conversations, again, that recharge me, but also like of substance and just energy, and just conversations about books like with a fellow book people. This is pretty nerdy, but I don't know, there's just something powerful, again, with like an emotional investment, like a series or something, and also knowing that not a lot of people read it. So as if this is like the last time you're going to talk about a book, you're like getting all your emotions out to this person. I don't know, but it just presents unlikely connections, I guess is what I'm trying to say. In a certain way, like you get the rep of like being a bookworm or a nerd or something like that. So you're all just kind of like nerds together for a second and geeking out over fantasy books and plot lines and whatever. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to come on here and say today, was that maybe we should take our headphones off every once in a while and look around, smell the roses, talk to people, be in tune with our surroundings. Not every day, but every once in a while, it wouldn't kill you. And then it actually might just recharge you more than coffee, because that's another thing, is my coffee tolerance, or caffeine tolerance, I should say, is so high. I feel like I need to have 2 Celsius to feel anything. So it's really just a placebo effect right now, or from here on out, really, when I go to a coffee shop and I buy a coffee. Really just the action of sipping is what's keeping me awake. So that conversation I had with that very kind and animated barista really recharged me more than anything else. So have a conversation with a stranger, be a friendly face, and maybe you will just be reminded of the humanity that we can see in each other, and, commonalities with unlikely people and stuff like that. And then an indirect plug to read books. If you ever feel like relationships are lacking substance and depth, become the book friend and find another book friend, and you will have great animated conversations and always have someone to go to who will match your energy. I find that when people are passionate, again, about the same things, like, they'll match your energy. So when you're passionate about books in particular, just book talk and bookstores, and everyone just tends to be friendly in a good community. So indirect plug as well / secondary point and lesson to this is to go read more, touch some grass and read a book on said grass, and get Goodreads too. Honestly, Goodreads is my favorite app now, probably. It motivates me to read more, and again, I find great community on there, and I love leaving super animated, like, in all caps reviews and stuff. So follow me on Goodreads, find me somewhere out there if you really want to. Later in the year, I definitely want to do an episode of books that I have read so far up to that point in the year, give my reviews on them, sort of thing. And maybe I could give you guys some, like, book recommendations. Maybe you can also then, as a result of that episode, know kind of my vibe and what I'm looking for, and give me book recommendations. I'm always down for it. So you could also DM the Hear Me Out Instagram, or you could comment on this podcast if you really wanted to, if you're on Spotify or YouTube. And that brings me to say that you can subscribe to the YouTube at Sadie Michael Morden, and you can follow the Instagram at HBU Hear Me Out. Thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully the 10 to 15 minute episode isn't jacking your style too much, and that's okay with you. I will see you next week. Have a good one.